Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Legally Speaking. I'm your host, Bilal Anwar. We are continuing our discussion on climate change. We're looking at climate finance and international climate policy, in particular in this episode. And for this, I'm joined by Mr. Bilal Anwar. Bilal Saab is an expert on international climate policy and finance. He's also served as part of the UN FCCC, and most recently, he was CEO of Pakistan's National Disaster Management Fund. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Bilal Saab, I wanted to begin by, we had this discussion and you had mentioned that the Kyoto Protocol's binding obligations have given way to a more voluntary scheme under the Paris Convention. Do you feel that has had an impact? Do you feel that it has diluted maybe the essence or the force behind much of the climate change policies, or at least the momentum that has developed internationally?
Certainly, it has certainly diluted. And the whatever limited success which was there in the Kyoto, in the case of the binding commitments, and also the binding commitments were nowhere close to the kind of the deeper cuts in the GHG emissions were required. Mm-hmm. It was only 5% from the baseline which was calculated back then.
I see.
And but then even that became actually extremely difficult. And none of the countries were actually able to achieve that. Mm-hmm. So in terms of this kind of international commitments and obligations, so there was a serious setback. And then it was such a serious setback. The Kyoto Protocol actually expired on 31st of December 2012. And the Paris Agreement was only agreed in 2015. Okay, so there was a lag of 3 years when the international climate policy was just in the search of some kind of a meaningful action.
I see.
And then what we saw in the Paris Agreement, which is actually a shift away, a complete departure from any legally binding commitments, and it's a lot more. It's entirely actually a voluntary based system and the compliance. So yes, that has certainly diluted, and we are actually already seeing the implications of it, what is happening.
Okay. So we had in last year, the ICJ's advisory opinion, and they had imposed an obligation, an advisory opinion as much as an obligation can, but at least a persuasive, it comes from a lot of backing by very high level jurists, that there's an obligation of due diligence to protect against, GHG emissions. Yeah. And states have this obligation. In your view, does that ruling really change anything practically? Does the advisory opinion merely add more weight to the moral argument, or is there some, practical manifestation of that, in your opinion?
Yeah, so that was very heavily celebrated, this ICJ advisory opinion, which actually came from, because what we're seeing in the negotiation rooms were actually the kind of opinions and the positions which the countries were taking, that they did not want to take any kind of, they did not actually translate it what happened in the Paris, that it has any legal underpinnings or anything actually compliance based or the responsibility in them. So we actually saw that, okay, this is a very good interpretation, and that certainly is going to be adding some weight towards the future negotiations. And we're not actually seeing that right now, and I think that opinion need to be taken further. It certainly adds to the moral and the legal kind of a weightage. The practical manifestation, I think that is going to take some time, and the international community actually have to work very, very hard and keep pushing towards that directions. And I really do not want to create kind of a differentiation between the developing and the developed countries at this case. Every single country or all sets of the countries actually have certain level of responsibilities and obligations. So I think that argument that, okay, the developed countries of course have the higher responsibility, they have to take the lead on a number of fronts, including cutting the emissions, supporting, providing the technical assistance as well as the financial and the technology for addressing and for dealing with the impacts of the climate change. But the developing countries, actually, the way actually they're developing, some of the developing countries are very fast developing countries. They have large populations. They're becoming heavily industrialized.
Absolutely.
So the pathways they are taking, I think that's what the transformation need to happen. and this I think should be taken serious in that context as well.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense there. So I wanted to move on to the loss and damage fund, and the two, rather striking, discussion points that we have. One, that the loss and damage fund, even though it's somewhat of a recent, it has come to the fore recently. Pakistan played a major role in this. It is losing its its momentum behind it. That's one argument, and the second is that the loss and damage fund has been deliberately designed, and maybe because of the people who have to actually fund it, to exclude liability and compensation and things where blame is really apportioned as such.
Yeah.
Do you think that is acceptable to the developing world, or does the developing world really not have a case to build here because they are on the receiving end as such of this?
Yeah, the way the decision came out for a loss and damage fund, establishment loss and damage fund, I think that was quite a disappointment, because all the liability and the compensation elements were what actually effectively taken out of that. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea behind the design of the loss and damage fund was actually based on the liability and the compensation and the economic kind of implications the countries are facing. So in a way, it was a disappointment, and then that disappointment actually didn't stop there either. It actually carried on, because there was again a delay in terms of his conceivement, and there was a lot of kind of an effort from different corners that not to have it established. And secondly, I mean, all the effective kind of elements were taken away. And then what we are seeing right now, even the fund is established, Pakistan did play a very effective role in that, and continue to play an effective role. But that, what we're seeing is there is no new funding is actually coming.
I see.
And but okay, I mean, money is one thing. I think the other thing is about the entitlement of the countries. Mm-hmm. I think that's where the bigger issue and the bigger conflict actually is there, that how this is going to be actually allocated, which countries are more kind of a deserving in this. And then the whole kind of a methodology and the science in order to do it in a kind of a fair manner, equitable manner, that hasn't really evolved within the international climate policy context either.
I see.
And there's a lot of research work which has taken place out of the UN system in the academic circles, and we can actually very, very precisely we can figure it out that what the countries are going to be facing the losses and the damages. Interesting.
And this is predictive, like in the future what they're going to face.
In the future.
Okay.
And that is very much technologically driven. I mean, interestingly, here in Pakistan as well, we can do it as well.
Okay, wow.
Within National Disaster Risk Management Fund, we actually established a natural catastrophic model, which is a risk modeling application, and it can actually build on the basis of the different hazards and the different disasters. It can build the losses and the damages almost 200-300 years in advance as well.
Oh wow, that's very impressive.
The other countries are far more ahead of us as well, many of them. So technologically it's possible, theoretically it's possible as well, but it just hasn't really, this kind of a disconnect between the policy and the technology and the science, and the implementation. I think that's a similar kind of a part of this whole kind of a conundrum which we are facing at the policy level.
I see. It's fascinating. So you have a background in economics as well, and I wanted to get a better idea of how this loss and damage is actually calculated. Is there a uniform model that is accepted widely, or is there varying models? And because we get different numbers, that Pakistan is facing this much and needs this much climate finance investment or something along those lines, and they vary widely. So is there some consensus model for this type of calculation?
Yeah, the variations are actually narrowing down now, because with the more kind of use of the technology and the advancement of the methodologies which actually does this kind of work as well. Mm-hmm. In many cases, in countries like Pakistan and many other countries, I think the vulnerability can be quite accurately evaluated.
I see.
And calculated as well. And if we have the data, and we have all the information actually at one place, and that can be done as well. It can be updated as well, with the remote sensing, with the satellite data, and with the GIS and number of other, and then very highly developed modeling applications as well. So the variation is actually is narrowing down quite substantially now. Now, and then when we're talking about an economy, and we're talking about a country like Pakistan, I think 10 to 20% of the variation is generally acceptable as well. 20% might be on the higher side, but plus minus 10% is acceptable. So the methodologies are pretty acceptable now to the international community, and those numbers are defendable numbers.
I see.
In case of Pakistan, many numbers are defendable numbers, and we can actually defend those. With the climate models becoming a lot more sharper and smarter, we can actually integrate those models into our domestic, local realities, and we can come up with the damages which we're going to be facing, the losses which we're going to be facing, and then the economic value of these damages and the losses. And the bifurcation between the damages and losses can also be done with a reasonable confidence level.
No, that's fascinating. It's particularly fascinating when you see the amount of when the actual person on the ground who is affected by this, whether it's the farmer or the person who's lost cattle in flooding, or his entire livelihood, how the particular these lofty ideals or these goals come and actually impact him or her in that sense. So you had mentioned that many of these the largest emitters in the world are insulated almost from the polluter pays principle and claims against them on that regard. Is there any legal pathway for states to be able to make claims or to be able to be compensated in any way currently that exists? And is there a pathway that we can perhaps pursue that will create or generate something along these lines?
Yeah, okay. I mean, if you allow me, there are several ways of looking of this challenge. I mean, the one thing is very clear. The large emitters are large emitters because they have the larger economies, and the lifestyle have evolved in a way that they are highly emission intensive economies, and the lifestyles, and they're almost every single sector of their economy is like that as well. But then they are also very influential players at the global scale as well. So that makes the whole kind of a challenge very, very tricky as well. Now the other level of the kind of the trickiness or the challenge of this is the climate change is a classic case of a global common good, or the tragedy of the common goods, and that is at a global scale as well. The climate change or the stability of the climate change, it's indivisible. It's inexcusable, and then you can't really stop that. If I am actually doing something, if I am actually keeping my house in order, and then the benefit is not actually reaching to somebody else. And when you actually look at it at a global scale, that becomes a very, very complex actually challenge.
Absolutely.
So that's another kind of a layer of the challenge which international climate policy has actually been trying to address that. How to address that, and not been extremely successful so far. That's one area of it. Now the other third component of it is the international systems haven't really evolved in such a manner that the sovereign states want to be or accepted to be dictated by any international or supranational bodies. And they just do not want this. And we're seeing this actually in many other areas as well, whether it's human rights, or it's nuclear, or it's climate change, or many other areas as well. So it's to create a kind of generally acceptable kind of a legal pathway in this kind of a challenging scenario and a situation. It is complex. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about it. But on the other hand, it is a global, it's a global concern, it's a global challenge, and it cannot be addressed by any single country, and every single country actually is being adversely impacted right now. So I think there's a need to kind of a change a kind of a approach towards that as well. So far, it is being accepted a global challenge, a global concern, but it is not accepted as a kind of a global problem which need to be addressed in a coordinated manner. I think that's what the real challenge is. And then in many areas, actually, there is a disconnect between the science and the policy as well.
Absolutely.
Something which you are actually referring, because of the emissions and then how the emissions actually interplay and impact the different countries. I think we haven't really reached to the level that some kind of a deeper, granular kind of bifurcation can be done, and the benefits can be drawn out that, okay, how the country are going to be benefiting if they are going to be taking some action here 30 years down the road, or 50 or 100 years down the road. So it becomes a very complex, become a very overarching as well. So that makes it very, very complex, and this is the complexity which we are seeing right now.
Bilal, I think another element that has played a huge role in how the world responds to this is domestic politics, right? In so many countries, we're seeing more populist movements coming in, which is putting nationalism and these things first, and they're saying that why should we have to pay for somebody else? Focus on more domestically. Is there a way at the international stage where we can insulate, the discussion, the debate on climate change from, say, the domestic politics? I know it's even as I ask this question, I know it's a very difficult task. But are there mechanisms like the convention or like other things that give some level of insularity and some level of protection and guarantees perhaps to such an important issue and prevents the shocks or the ups and downs of, say, nationalism and populist governments really impacting that?
Yeah, I mean, it directly impacts that. And it is once again a kind of an extremely complex, because whether we kind of divide the argument from polluter pay principle side, or kind of who takes the benefit out of it, on a long-term basis. Yeah, I think there is an economic cost and there's a social cost actually involved to it. And then it's actually need to be kind of grinded down to the domestic politics as well, that this is something which is going to be haunting us, which is going to be having an impact at intergenerationally. And I think this is something which need to be done at the domestic level as well. Now, climate change, you're absolutely right, it has become in many countries, in many parts of the world, it has become a kind of a very easy tool in the hands of the national politics and activist movements and the nationalist movement in many countries as well. I think to me, this is because of the awareness and the knowledge building which should have been done. I think that has been actually lacking.
I see.
And the international climate policy actually suffered with the climate deniability for a very long period of time. And then many sectors, especially the oil and gas sector, has been actually working against it and working quite effectively against it as well. So that actually also had quite significant repercussions on the development and evolution of these kind of responsibilities and the country level kind of actions as well. So there are possibilities, and I think, but now, as you said that, it's a farmer in Sindh, or is some kind of a local shopkeeper in Balochistan, which basically has been affected by the floodwater.
Absolutely.
I think if it has the impact has gone to that level, then it should not be such a complex. It should not be such a rocket science for making people and the politicians to understand that this ought to be taken seriously. This ought to be fully integrated into whatever the development models and development pathways which we are charting out right now.
Absolutely. So I want to return to the domestic sphere, especially Pakistan, and the great work that you've done with the the National Disaster Management Fund as well. But just before that, staying at the international level, we got commitments of say $100 billion, and then estimates were revised to $300 billion and things like that. But a lot of this is unmet, right? A lot of these flows have not really materialized. What, in your opinion, would be a genuinely just mechanism for this type of compensation? I know you've mentioned that who is entitled to it, right? So entitlement is one aspect of it, but who needs to pay, and what are the international movements perhaps that are advocating for such a thing that seem to you to be the most just outcome here?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, when we were young and we actually got into the climate debates, and we were actually hearing the numbers in the negotiation room that okay, countries need hundreds of billions of dollars for their climate actions, and we used to say that, oh wow, this is such a big number, and
Exactly.
where the money is going to come from?
That's true.
And but that thing is losing its value now. We're talking about hundreds of billions, and the recent numbers are actually saying trillions as well.
My
And
God.
and this is daunting. This is frightening
Yeah.
actually. That okay, where is that money? What we see in general, there's a movement actually going in the opposite direction. We're seeing that the fundings, international financial assistance is being cut down, not only for climate change, for conventional development purposes as well. And a number of programs, even in Pakistan and many other deserving countries, actually have been cut down, and then the new funding is just not available. Now, I think. So what does it mean in practical terms? I think there's quite a shift right now is happening in terms of the assistance, the financial assistance, which actually has been flowing from the developed countries to the developing countries as well. The need is still there. The moral obligation and the moral argument is still very much there. And I personally believe that the developed countries, the industrialized countries who have developed the lifestyles, and they are actually disproportionately emitting the carbon emissions and continue to emit the carbon emissions, I think they need to take the responsibility for that as well. I mean, there is absolutely no question about it. But the reality being that the willingness is not there, the political commitment is not there, and the financial commitment is not really following as well. So I think the model can be shifted in a way that towards more kind of a investment oriented. And there are a lot of kind of opportunities in Pakistan. There are a lot of opportunities for climate investment as well, for a number of reasons, because our agriculture is pretty emission intensive. Our energy sector is emission intensive. Most of the technology in the industry is quite outdated as well, and the process and the energy efficiencies, the room for is pretty high as well. So I think that's where we need to shift ourselves. And there are some kind of tools which have evolved in this particular context, especially in the larger kind of investment framework. Instead of waiting and asking for the grant money and concessional finance, I think we should be looking more towards investments, making utilization of the de-risking tools. And those de-risking tools, especially into the areas where any reasonable or conventional investor won't like to step in. I think there the concessional finance and the government finance and assistance can actually play a role.
So things like insurance and things that allow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think those are the areas where the developing countries in general need to focus a lot more rather than the concessional finance. But at the international stage and the forums, I think the war is very much still on. And I think that still need to be fought with heart and soul, that this should not be taken as a charity, but this is a right of the developing countries. And they should be given that right in the form of technology, in the form of financial and technical assistance.
Absolutely. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So I wanted to come back to you're coming off over 4 years of a stint at the National Disaster Management Fund as CEO. So could you explain to me some of the, we discussed some of the investments, and then that is a model. What are some of the investments that in Pakistan, either the fund itself did or that you've encouraged in the domestic sphere? Because I know there are a number of areas, and you said that Pakistan is a opportunity-rich area when it comes to these things. But one major aspect is awareness raising, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's because of education levels or lack of penetration of these ideas, but we lack serious understanding of many of these issues, much like the rest of the world, but Pakistan in particular as well. So, are there particular interventions that have been backed by the fund that have looked at these issues and maybe other investment opportunities as well?
Yeah. So let me start off with yes, absolutely. Pakistan is opportunity rich and a rich country, and there are, because of the number of reasons, because of the agriculture and technology and industry and number of especially transportation, and we're seeing some level of transformation which is happening right now in the transformation in the transport sector as well. So there are a number of opportunities here which need to be tapped out. Now, my core area of expertise is the carbon markets, and that's where actually I started my career from as well. A few years ago, I did a study with the government of Pakistan, and we found out that the cost of emission reductions, technical jargon we call it marginal abatement cost, and was quite low in Pakistan as compared to a number of other comparable countries in the region as well.
So let me understand that for a layman. So that means to reduce emissions in Pakistan, it is cheaper than in other countries.
Yes,
is that significantly cheaper? Okay.
Significantly cheaper.
I see.
And we actually did some model work at that time, and we said that so those are the different sectors, and at that time actually transportation, energy, and agriculture, and then industry were the prominent sectors.
Okay.
And so what does that mean is that any investor who's looking to reduce emissions or who's actually looking to set up the industry, and then they have the moral conscience to be not very emission intensive, and or they have some compliance reasons internationally. So Pakistan actually can be and should be presented as an investment destination to those group of investors internationally.
I see.
And there's a little bit of a legwork which is needed to be done. Those sectors, they need to be highlighted. And some of the research work and some of the tools need to be developed which actually attract these investors. Now, that's for carbon, and which is considered to be the most complex one actually.
I see. Wow.
And but in other areas,
sorry for interrupting. Just to help me understand this. So the investment would come in because this Pakistan reducing its emissions would allow others to offset some of the things there. So it's an exchange really that's taking place, and so our quota is then being shifted there. I understand. Okay, now.
Yeah. So it's basically it's offsetting. So anyone who need to reduce emission, instead of reducing their emissions at any other part of the world where it is reducing a ton is much expensive, costlier.
I see, yes.
As compared to reduce it here. From a climate perspective, a ton is a ton. It doesn't matter where it is reduced.
Whether it's a Pakistani ton or
whether it's
Indian
a Pakistani
ton
or Indian ton or it's an American ton or Dutch ton, a ton is a ton.
Yes.
So I think that's the kind of a science behind it.
Okay.
And that's how the global carbon market in the very initially, that was the single most principle.
Absolutely.
Which was actually thought about at that time, and we thought, okay, then a whole system, a whole regime was actually created under the Kyoto Protocol, and that still is very much intact under the Paris Agreement as well.
I see.
So I think that's one area, and which Pakistan should explore, and it hasn't been explored right now to the extent it should have been.
I see.
And we in the NDRMF, we actually tried and we engaged with the private sector, and we provided them a lot of technical assistance and the support, and in terms of how they can actually benefit from it, because within the NDRMF there's a lot of technical knowledge and expertise for this particular area.
I see.
And we did actually extend that, and we motivated. We're quite actually surprised pleasantly surprised to see the response from the private sector.
That's wonderful.
And that's actually, we're very happy about that. Now, other than that, our focus within NDRMF has been largely on the flood protection, and because as soon as I joined NDRMF, and I was in the middle of devastating 2022 flood, and that actually shifted the focus towards the flood, and then we invested a lot, and we actually completed a lot of projects, actually very much dedicated in the most vulnerable regions within Pakistan.
I see.
And many of those flood structures and the DRR structures which we erected back then, they were able to withhold themselves in 2025 floods, and we did the assessment for that, and we were quite pleased with that. Now, in addition to that, I think one of the biggest kind of legacy which we did, and I did, but that is still there. So we set up this natural catastrophic model. It's a risk modeling system and application, and which is actually quite advanced, and it can actually do the modeling work for the future disasters and the hazards and the scenarios, and can come up with a very reliable kind of pictures and the curves, which can be utilized, which should be and must be utilized for a lot of planning work and the relief and recovery work as well.
So just in this, and this is my inner techno fanatic asking. So for having these models, I'm assuming you require a lot of compute power, maybe a data center that can take all this data in, and this infrastructure we have in Pakistan.
This infrastructure is very much intact.
Okay.
We established that.
Okay, wonderful.
We established in NUST.
I see.
Because it remains accessible to the students for a research community.
I see.
And
Excellent.
It is being utilized by the research community quite effectively.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And the other thing, the other kind of awakening when I came to Pakistan was in the flood 2022, there was a large chunk of the funding even from NDRMF, but many other institutions as well. It was actually taken away from the social sector, and it was immediately put into the relief and recovery work, which of course was much needed. And that actually came out quite a surprise as well, that there's no mechanism in place where the government actually have some kind of a buffer, fiscal buffer, where they can actually provide this kind of a support on an urgent basis. And the other thing was, there was no, what we call it, disaster risk financing, so there's no instruments, no mechanism available, where the risk is not actually entirely on the government budget and the government books, but it can be transferred to the private sector as well, to the extent possible. And we actually established this disaster risk financing mechanism, and the international community and the donors, they were very supportive of that.
Okay.
And this is what actually we're seeing. This has been my learning from other countries, and I've seen where actually I was previously working. I came with this kind of a knowledge and the expertise, and we set out, established the basic foundation and the system for that.
I see.
And now it's a matter of building on it, setting up the instrument, the risk insurance instruments and the catastrophic bonds, and the number of instruments which have been very successfully experimented around the world. I think this is where the fiscal resilience in Pakistan is going to come from, and that's the only way to achieve the fiscal resilience because of the climatic challenges which Pakistan is going to face.
And I think that's a shorthand for saying the recurring challenges that really we face, right? Because floods are not a one-off thing that we see. No. They're happening every 2, 3, 4 years in Pakistan. That makes a lot of sense. Bilal sir, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.